Why is it that people that claim they've been studied and trained in NLP seem so creepy and socially uncalibrated? Why is it that people that have spent tens of thousands of dollars and years studying NLP from the top NLP trainers can't persuade their way out of a paper bag? Why does NLP seem like such crappy snake oil nonsense? By the end of this video, dear viewer, you will understand why most people can't use NLP to do jack shit, and you will understand the secret to become more persuasive than even the most seasoned salespeople. First, why is NLP such a clunky pile of uncalibrated social crap that nobody can use to persuade anybody? NLP has basically three components. There's the NLP language that people use to pretend they know how to persuade people. Then there's NLP kind of self-development, the kind where you move pictures around in your brain and use NLP on yourself to imagine different scenarios and the swish pattern and whatever. Then there's NLP modeling, where you kind of use a technique, self-hypnotic techniques, to copy the behavior of other people. In this video, we'll be talking about the NLP persuasion, the language patterns that these NLP people can allegedly use to persuade people. NLP as a persuasive language technology was reverse engineered mostly from Milton Erickson. If you don't know Milton Erickson, he was a super genius when it came to helping people solve problems. He was a therapist, and he invented a kind of conversational hypnosis, a kind of conversational storytelling technique. People would come to him with a problem, and they would say, "Doctor, I've got this problem." And he would say, "Tell me about your problem." And they would tell him about their problem. And he would say, that reminds me of a story. And he would tell this super convoluted, super hard to follow story. An hour later, 2 hours later, the customer, the patient, would have no idea what had just happened. And they would leave going, "I just think I just wasted my money." But then 2 weeks later, poof, their problem was gone. So they came in and they studied how Milton Erickson talked to people. They studied his language patterns. They studied his story structure. And they took this reverse engineered language patterns and they transplanted this into NLP seminars, and they taught these people this language technology. And this is the language technology that people allegedly learn and then later try to persuade other people. The problem is this is only about 10% of what is really going on during these conversations. And once you understand the missing ingredients as to why Erickson was so incredibly persuasive, you can become as persuasive as him. So the first thing to understand is when Erickson was a kid, he had polio. And he heard the doctor talking to his mom. And the doctor said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Erickson, but your son's gonna die, probably pretty soon." And young Erickson heard the doctor tell his mom that, and he thought, "Holy fuck, I'm going to die soon." So he looked out the window, he watched the sunset, and he became okay with dying. He accepted his own death. But then he didn't die. And what happens when you accept your own death and you don't die? On the other side of that experience, you become socially fearless. Now, why do you become socially fearless if you accept your own mortality, if you make peace with your ultimate end? Well, if you think of an ancient hunter-gatherer environment, any kind of negative social signal is a warning that you are doing things, and if you don't stop doing those things, your shit's getting kicked out of the tribe, and that makes you feel terrified. This is why everybody has social anxiety. This is why everybody in the back of their mind has this little voice saying, whenever you're talking to people socially, don't do anything that will invite negative social attention, because that, according to your ancient instincts, means you're about to die. But if you accept your death, if you accept that you will die and you make peace with your ultimate doom, then these negative social signals no longer matter. They don't mean anything. And that gives you a much more powerfully attractive, powerfully charismatic, powerfully congruent energy when you talk to people. This very, very literal, deep, subconscious, I don't give a fuck attitude. And that's the mindset that Erickson had when he talked to people. In fact, his whole communication model was built by trial and error experimentation under the framework of that. I don't care what happens when I talk to people because I'm not concerned in the least of any negative social consequences. And that's how he developed his language patterns. So not only was he using his intuition when he was talking to people, he wasn't using a list of memorized patterns that he read in a book. He was using his intuition that came after 10, 20, 30 years of experimentation under the framework of I don't care what people say to me. And so that energy he had was extremely persuasive, extremely charismatic. He had absolute full access to his brain. Every time you're talking to somebody and you're watching them and you're paying attention to what they're saying and you're paying attention to their nonverbal communication, part of you is a little nervous, and that nervous part of you sucks up a lot of your brain energy, so that means you have less brain energy to think of what to say. But Erickson had 100% of his brain when he was talking to people that he could devote to thinking about what to say. So he was very, 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 very focused on the conversation with 100% of his brain. He wasn't worried about the other person reacting negatively to anything that he said. That's the first clue. The second clue is this was back in the day. Erickson would heal patients back in the day before insurance companies took over the therapeutic industrial complex. Now, what the heck does this have to do with anything? If you have a problem and you want to go see a therapist, chances are your insurance is going to pay the bill for the therapist, which means you're not paying out of your pocket, which means you're a little bit less likely to try really, really hard to solve your problem. A lot of people go see a therapist these days just to talk about their problems and get validation that their problems are not their fault, or just to have somebody to talk to. But back then, people had problems and they had to pay cash out of their own pocket, out of their own bank account, out of their own wallet to a therapist to hopefully solve their problems. So they had a much higher vested interest to solve their problems, which means they were very, very focused on the conversation. They were listening to what Erickson said with intense interest, hoping what he would say would solve their problems. And 3, Erickson was extremely popular. He had a massive reputation. So if you wanted to see Erickson as a therapist or as a patient, you had to wait a long time. You couldn't just call him and see him next Tuesday. You had to call him and see him next month or next year. And so not only were you paying out of pocket a lot of money, but you had to wait a few months to see this guy. So by the time you talked to him, you were ready. You were ready to listen to everything he said. So the communication between Erickson and his patients were extremely, extremely congruent. The patients had a massive interest in listening to every single thing he said. And he had this massive persuasive energy with 0 social fears and 10, 20, 30 years of intuition about what to say in the moment. And the surface structure language, if this is all you see, if this is all you use, and you try to take the surface structure language without noticing all the stuff going on beneath this, and you take this into a conversation, of course you're going to come across as an uncalibrated creep who uses NLP to do whatever you think you're doing. So the question is, dear viewer, how can you replicate all this stuff on the bottom without needing to spend 20 years of intuition, without needing a near-death experience? Well, it's very, very easy. The first part is to talk to this person in a way that they will pay attention to you. If you're some uncalibrated creep who's using only the surface structure level of NLP talking to a normal person today, their attention span is going to be all over the place. They're not going to be paying attention to you. You're going to be super uncalibrated. It's going to be a crappy communication. But if you talk to somebody about something they're super keenly interested in, which is their own internal mental maps, the things they want in life, their greatest experiences, their greatest accomplishments, of course they're going to be keenly interested. And if you just ask questions, that will destroy any social anxiety. Because social anxiety comes from trying to take my idea and cram it in your brain. And as soon as I take an idea in my head, and I try to cram it in your brain, there's always the chance you're going to cram it back at me, and that's where the social anxiety comes from. But if I'm just asking you questions and I'm genuinely curious about your answers and I'm genuinely interested in your mental map, there's no social anxiety. I just ask questions and watch you build your mental map. I ask you questions and watch you build your mental map. I ask questions and watch you build your mental map. So that will solve both sides of the equations. You will destroy your social anxiety. You'll pay close attention to the people you're talking to, and they will talk about stuff they are keenly interested in. And this whole time, during this whole conversation, you will build out their mental maps. You will understand exactly what they want. You will understand exactly how they see the world. You will understand their language map of the world. So when it does come time to maybe use a little bit of NLP or hypnotic language patterns at the end of the conversation, you will know exactly which phrases to put them in, so it will sound like music to their ears, and it will be just as persuasive as Erickson. That is exactly how salespeople that use this technique are making 6 figures a year with only 10, 15 hours a week. Now, I don't know if you want to be as persuasive as that. I don't know how you want to use this technology, but if you want to be as persuasive as Erickson, turn off your ego, ask questions of the other person, be keenly interested in their mental maps, listen carefully to what they say. They will give you the keys to the kingdom, and you can use the keys of the kingdom in terms of your own studied hypnotic language patterns to get them to do anything that you want.